Welcome again to our podcast channel called Cosmopolis. And in this series on conversations around creative writing, we, have conversations with writers, editors, publishers, all kinds of people who have got to do with the world of creative writing. And today we are very fortunate to have Shinie Antony with us. Off the top of my head, the first thing that occurs to me is that Shinie has probably played every role there has to be around the world of literature, whether it is being an editor, being publisher, being a columnist, a novelist, a short story writer. So you've seen the world of literature through many windows, so to speak, and it's great to have you. More specifically, she's written short story books, Barefoot and Pregnant, the Orphanage for Words, the novels The Girl Who Couldn't Love, and When Meera Went Forth and Multiplied. She has compiled the anthologies Why We Don't Talk and Unsuitable Woman and Boo. She's been co-founder of the Bangalore Literature Festival and in some sense is responsible very much for keeping the literary scene in Bangalore alive. She's also the director of the Bengaluru Poetry Festival. Her story, A Dog's Death, won the Commonwealth Short Story Asia prize in 2002. And her novella Can't, which is to be published by the Speaking Tiger Publications, will be out this year. So Shinie, once again, welcome to this conversation.
Thank you, Ravi.
Yeah.
And thanks for reading out my bio in such a way that I feel it's very happening bio.
No. I mean, I didn't mean to read it out. It's just that the names of the books. So for me, like I said, I think in the world of writing is, as I keep saying, is a world on itself, and have spent so many years in it, and you also have taught creative writing. That also you have done. I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can gain, and from the right away I would like to jump into your role as an editor, because and like I was asking you before this podcast, that your natural inclination is literary fiction, exploring characters in depth and detail, whereas as an editor you have also had the experience of discovering and editing well-known writers like Chetan Bhagat. So can you talk about that experience a little bit more, and then I will probe you further there. So
Actually, my love for editing surpasses my love for writing any day. I feel very alive and very involved as an editor. When I'm reading somebody else's work, then it's like even if it's a very well-known writer, you're reading that work for the first time, and that always keeps you mentally on your toes. And for me, editing has never been about line editing or proofreading, though that's also part of your job as an editor.
Yeah.
It's more of an internal read where you're able to get into the writer's head, and you're seeing the world the way it's a new world. Each book, what it does is lay out a new world for you where you enter, and you have to believe everything in that world, whatever the rules may be of that world. It may closely resemble the world you live in, or it may be an absolute new thing like a fantasy novel, or a den of smugglers which you've not seen firsthand. But for me, the important thing is that to go up when the writer means you to go up, and go down when the writer means you to go down. And as you walk in the shoes of the writer, if there's anything that strikes you as, because I am a hyper reader, like I said about my listening, I don't like to hear repeats. I cannot bear to read repeats, so I'm able to mark out those areas and say, I think you're just revisiting something that you've written earlier, but you've repeated it here in a different language. And then you leave the choice completely to the writer. You just give your first read feedback. This is what I felt. It reminded me of this story, or it reminded me of that book, it reminded me of this news story. And these are my first reactions or comments about the story. What I loved about it, what I could not take on board during that. So in this way, basically, what I'm doing is giving back. Because when I started to write, I also had these people whom I would run my writing by. Give it to them and ask them for their opinion. And if they did not give you sincere feedback, later you suffer. So that sincerity is something that I'm paying forward. Editing is an extremely demanding thing of you emotionally and physically, because you are sitting in a place, you are reading, you are letting go of a lot of other jobs that maybe you should be doing. And emotional because you're constantly involved with the words. Every word you are, it's registering in your mind, is this word necessary? Is this word working here? Is there a better word? Is there something I can, and it's very easy to tell a writer this is not working or I didn't like it. That's how all of us writers get rejected. Nobody gives you any feedback on why it's being rejected or why it doesn't work. So when you're telling a writer you didn't like something, then you're also giving them some kind of a choice. This is perhaps how you could come back to it. And obviously what you suggest is not the gospel truth. There is no gospel truth here. So they have a choice to decide whether they want to. So I think it's more like when a child is talking, then there's somebody listening very carefully to what they are saying, and they are saying things which are not in the adult's reality, but the adult is able to just make sense of it back to the child. So you're just doing that very intimate job of reading and understanding and following that particular world with utmost sincerity.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the kind of interesting part is, as you said, it's about following an emotion, etc. But when it comes to popular fiction, especially fiction that is read by millions of people, I am getting the sense every day that emotions can also be commodities, which is to say that, I was listening to an interview of Chetan Bhagat once where he talks about how the process is so mechanized and streamlined now that each book is like a product. So what happens is, he described a process where he writes a book, and then obviously the book, it's sent to 100 readers who don't know that he's the author, and then they register their emotions, authentically, and that is all mapped and measured, and then he gets that feedback, and then tweaks his novel as per the whatever that sample represents of the popular pulse, so to speak. So he wants to resonate his work. So in this day and age, when you have such a streamlined process of making a popular book or manufacturing it almost, how do you look back in
That's
your
not true,
it's a caricature, I guess.
Yeah, there's absolutely no formula, because then there would be hundreds of Chetans.
Yeah.
Everybody, as an editor, I feel a lot of people come to me and say they either like me a lot for no reason because I'm Chetan's editor, or they dislike me a lot for no reason because I'm Chetan's editor. And some of them want to be as successful as him, and they give me something they've written and they say, work your magic. Now the thing is, an editor doesn't work magic. The magic originally belongs to the writer. And if we are talking about Chetan, then I would say Chetan does a lot of research on every book that he's done to make it very, very contemporary. And every book of his is different in content from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not easy to replicate his success, be that committed to what he's writing. And as I was saying earlier, he's a very dialogue person. Very few writers, fiction writers in India are able to revolve the plot around dialogue. And he has given a very specific dialogue to Indian readers. Like, there's a Malayalam actor who passed away recently called Innocent, and he brought to Kerala comedy scene just his accent. He was from Thrissur, and a lot of comedians, which is supposed to be the comic accent, so a lot of comedians in Kerala, Malayalam films, would copy that accent only for comedy. But what was unique about Innocent is that even in his serious roles, he had that same accent. He made that work. So I feel in Chetan's case, Chetan has been able to, maybe because of his MBA and his IIT background, he has been able to look at his book in a three-dimensional way. But beginning with the important dimension of writing something that's new and fresh and researched and not self-imitative. Maybe the other two dimensions are the same for every book. Maybe he test runs it with some readers, and maybe he takes their advice and goes accordingly. I wouldn't know. And maybe the third thing about the whole sales thing, because his first book was priced at 95 rupees, and at that time in the Indian book market, no book was priced that low. We had 150 onwards. So to have a 250 page book going for 95 rupees, which for the Indian buyer is like, oh, it's less than 100. That's a smart move. And whatever loss came about, he said, I will take it. I'm all right with that. So there are strategies that Chetan has adopted, which are different but which are copyable by anyone. But the core talent that he has of speaking for the new Indian man or woman, I don't think that is run of the mill, or that's something that I can say I can give this class where I tell people how to be the next Chetan Bhagat. That would not happen. Because every writer brings himself or herself so much to the table, and Chetan is able to do that. Tapping into his own psyche, he's able to bring something different. Otherwise, it would not sell like this. His books would not be the book before coming out. The booking orders are huge. That would not happen. Then it would happen to everyone.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things on that note is, because you've seen this sector for such a long time, is, how there have been waves and waves of different ideas which have, sort of taken over the popular imagination. So, I mean, as someone who was in that position, how has this landscape of popular fiction writing, how has it changed according to you, and how has that possibly even cast a shadow on the literary fiction scene, whatever?
I work with books much before they come out. So if I could answer your question accurately, if I was on the other end, I was on the reading end, or I've sold it and I made this huge killing, then I can come back to you and say, oh my God, Whereas for me, when a book comes to me, I don't know if it's commercial or literary. I'm looking at it as a good book or a bad book. Does it work for me? Does it not work for me?
I see.
Just because it does not work for me, I have to also think about people for whom it may work. Like a book may be very young for me, but I know there is a whole young adult audience waiting to read books. So if I cannot categorize that book and like some elements of that book, I cannot sit and edit that book. So my job is actually not to look that far in the future. And you have to remember one thing, I'm paid equally. Whether this book is going to become a success later on, I cannot be charging accordingly right now. So for me, all of those are my babies. Some of them go on to become, of course, like you say, if it's a Chetan Bhagat or a Preeti Shenoy, I know their books have been traditionally super successful and they will go on to be successful. But other than that, Janvi Barua is considered a literary writer, okay? But she writes contemporary fiction. So for me, it's more like, is this book or is this story rooted in the present? That would make a difference to me. Or if it's rooted, like say in the 80s or the 70s or the 60s or the 50s, where I have to do a lot more homework. I would not know how to relate certain things, I would need to find out. But if it's rooted in today, then that's all I'm looking at, really. To me, it's like how the way people dress, you know. You register it and you let it go, because, you know, somebody is dressed in jeans, somebody is dressed in a suit, but it's the same meeting, you know. But you can't not take their ideas on board or be prejudiced about anybody's ideas because of the way they present themselves. So for me, the story does the talking. In fact, just an offshoot of that, I'll tell you, a lot of people, they meet me and they tell me huge elaborate plots that they're planning to write, you know. I listen to them, but I always tell them, you know, it just has to be in the writing. That energy, that feverish feeling that you get, that I've got this beautiful story and I want to share it with people, it has to come out in the writing. Sometimes we are able to talk beautifully about what we are going to write. You know, before Jeetal was longlisted, I think, for Narcopolis, he had said in an interview that you know, I just got off my feet and started to write, instead of talking about the books I'm going to write. So I feel that a lot of us get entangled in that, and then we start building this thing verbally or inside your head, and then we don't really put it down on paper. So the first act of bravery, you have put your story on paper and you're ready to go public with it, and you're saying, please read it, or please edit it, please give me some feedback. For me, that is a defining moment, and I want to know what that story is. But definitely, like, I would not be able to categorize, will this become popular fiction or will this become, those are very limiting labels, and those are for the sales people. People who sell books will have a lot to tell you about this, you know, but people who edit books have nothing to do with that, because neither does their fee depend on how successful that book is, nor do their feedback depend on that.
So can you, I mean, logically, just a curiosity occurs to me, has it ever happened that a book that you rejected for some reason probably went to some other publisher or some other editor, and then it turned out to be a well-known book? Has that happened? Like, I'm just curious.
It has happened actually once.
Okay. And is that something you can tell us about?
No, in the sense that I really I could not relate to that character, and it had a lot about a particular area in India which I had not much knowledge about. And I thought the writing was too pat and everything just fell into place in a manipulative way, or what is it called, in a very you know, I'm not getting the word, like they're trying to manipulate us basically. So I gave that back and I said, you know, I don't think I want to edit this. But it did get edited and it went on to become quite a hit. So then I did think, oh, you know, but that did not bother me so much, because I may have done a bad job with it. It went to the right editor. See, the editor is also, it has to be a good fit. So if I force myself to edit something that I don't understand too much or don't appreciate too much, I do the same thing with book reviews. So some newspaper will say, we are sending you this book, and I say, yes, send it to me. I go through it like 1/4 of the way and I find it not my type. Then I don't want to read the whole thing and give a negative review for no reason, because I am irritated. So I would rather send it back to them or say that I cannot do this. I feel whatever the book, if I cannot focus on the positives of it, I have no business talking about it. If it's so completely negative and it's horrible for me, I still have to think of the author. So
indeed, and is that something? I think do you feel that you are more charitable to relatively obscure authors because they deserve that, because they're trying to get onto the scene, and you know they don't.
See, Chetan was obscure when I picked him. I have worked with many authors who have gone on to become big names or known names, maybe not as famous, super famous as Chetan, but they've become good names. And I have not known anything about them. They were relatively unknown. So for me, that's not a criterion at all. Because in fact, what I feel in the book world is that your second book is sometimes picked apart. Your first book can become like super successful, but the second book everybody is envious, and everybody is like, you don't deserve that success, you know. So I feel anybody who's written one successful book but then gives you a second book which is semi-successful, that's a huge thing, you know. So I feel I'm very full of hamdardi for people who write, and it's a brave act. And if I don't like a particular manuscript, I know that there's somebody else who will like it and give it the, you know, love and care that I probably can't. But I don't take on work which I can't relate to, and I don't review books that I can't understand or identify with.
I see. And I think that brings us to the next part of the podcast and the next set of things which you do, because when you talk about the art of reviewing, and which basically points to this whole culture of talking about books, judging books, and when I was younger, I used to think that there are lots of people in the world who keep talking about books but don't read them.
Yeah.
Whereas now I believe that through festivals and stuff, we should keep talking about books ad nauseum until we eventually pick the book we haven't read and read it indeed. So I mean, this whole thing that you have done, being part of apart from your own work as an editor and writer, that you have sort of been part of the Bangalore literary scene, and you have co-founded the festival. I mean, can you give us a sort of a front row seat to how that leads to a certain genuine revival of literature, just having these conversations, open discussions? So
I feel of late, the new reality is that literature festivals have become a genre by themselves. So there are people who may not pick up a book and read. There are people who may not know about books, and certainly not new books, but they would still come to the venue and they would still listen to these authors talk, because authors are intellectuals, they're thinkers, they're analysts, and they're sometimes so good with their prognostic diagnosis that you do want to come and attend a session and listen to what they're saying, depending on if the topic interests you. Like we had a Me Too panel which got a standing ovation, moderated by Barkha Dutt. Then we had a session which was moderated by Arshia Sattar, where Girish Karnad and Arun Shourie almost fought, So I know that these debates which can get heated because of the subject matter, because you're bringing people from opposing views, and that's where your curation lies. You pick up a topic and then you bring people who will add a lot of depth to it, definitely, but also a bit of drama to it. So I feel that's a way to package so that people get interested in those topics, themes, writers, the discussion, and they come and they listen to that. And after that, like our bookstore does very good business. Even the Poetry Festival, the bookshop runs huge business. So that means people listen and they go pick up. And this I've been told by many writers, that in Bangalore the book buying is high, and for that they need that little nudge. They've heard you on on stage, something you've said has interested them, and then they go pick up your book. So that I feel is it's an incestuous kind of thing. One feeds the other, one feeds the other. So I feel literature festivals kind of revive interests in books that are probably forgotten or slightly old. And also when a writer is talking about a particular topic, the others are the readers or the audience is going and finding out his older books. If you like a writer, then you will want to pick up all his past books. So I feel for writers also, that's a forum where they meet their readers. They're able to make eye contact with their readers. Writers otherwise, what do? Again, to quote another writer, Cyrus Mistry had said long back during the DSC prize, I think, he said that writers have a very lonely life. They are like undertakers in the morgue. when they're writing, because they meet no one, nobody is giving them constant feedback. So they're just writing in that thing. But when they come out to the Lit Fest, they also get a sense of self. They get an idea of how people have received what they've written. So it's like going live with your writing.
Yeah, and that brings me to the point about the fact that we talked about editors, the publishing sector, festivals, and the one elephant in the room, I would say, are universities. What role do they have in apart from the fact that they have literature disciplines which at least create a certain audience because people are enrolling and they are studying books as part of their syllabi. But apart from that, now if you've seen, like, one of the things that at least universities like ourselves are doing is that we realize that being part of this creative economy is very significant and it just is organic to our own vision of being a place as a hub, which is a hub for ideas. So how are you seeing this new trend? How do you see that?
See, I am very appreciative of it, maybe because when I was younger, being a writer was not something that you could confidently tell your peers or parents and get away with.
Yeah.
You didn't. Today, you can say, I want to be a screenplay writer, I want to be an ad filmmaker. I can, the whole avenue has opened up, and even the courses are according to that. I did a journalism course, so there was just journalism and there was advertising, and then maybe there was PR. But now there's a variety of courses itself. So you're spoiled for choice when you come in. You're a creative person, yes. Your parents don't have an issue with that. They don't say, no, leave this, you have to study maths. Or even if you've done maths, you can come to creative writing. Because creative writing is like it's just like an envelope. You can do anything and still put yourself into creative writing, because that will only hone your skills, your communication skills, your writing skills. And everywhere people are, whether you like it or not, they are judging you by what you talk, what you type, what you text, and therefore what you think. So you want to go to the source and you want to polish your thoughts. And I think for that, universities or schools doing literature festivals, we've done it in schools also, in Coimbatore and Kerala. So to go to colleges and schools and do this, you're then thinking of what the students like. I'm now talking from this side, from people who organize these things. What I like is, you can bring in environment, you can bring in politics, you can bring in so many things in different formats. We did an entire thing on mudras, we did plays, songs. So I just feel that through that joy of discovery, the students are guided, they come to their own creative path. Because all these things what we do, whether I do Lit Fest or whether you do this in the universities, it boils down to the student. What are their interests? Are they inclined towards this? All we are saying is, here are your opportunities, here are your chances, and here are the paths that you can take, basically. So that choice alone is huge evolution, because when I was young, I did not have that choice. I was always guided by my elders to pick up a field which would give me a job, which would let me make a living. But now people know that you can make a living of sorts in this field too. That's a huge change for me.
Yeah, and I think that brings us again to the last part, where the fact is that you now do write, right? Ultimately, you've come around to writing. One of the things which actually occurred to me while I was speaking to you is, I'm assuming that you began writing or publishing much after you began editing. Is that right?
No.
You had begun that earlier.
I used to write for newspapers, and I was with I was with certain newspapers. I was with I was editing. I was writing with Midday. I was editing with Economic Times, and then with Financial Express. And then I worked with the news agency. Then I worked with Amar Chitrakatha briefly, and all the while I was also a fiction writer and also editing. Yeah.
I see. Okay, so can you and this is a curiosity that for me, because whatever amateur attempts I had at writing myself was in some sense to if not imitate, but sort of have these great writers who are profound influences on your own style. So immediately off the top of your head, do such figures come to your mind who you were deeply inspired by, or was it purely an enterprise that was driven by, okay, I want to write about this, so I'm writing about that? So
actually, for me, I am an extremely lazy writer. If you tell me I will never write again, I would be very thrilled. I really feel writing takes too much out of you. It's just not worth it to be a writer. And I'm not saying this just because I'm a poor writer. Even if I was a millionaire writer, I would still say writing is extremely exhausting in every way. So I write only if a character or a particular line comes into my head and does not go out. And then it becomes like, and then it starts clarifying itself. The more I try to push that person or that line out, it's more and more of, how do I put it, like, it just keeps getting clearer. And I know I've written a story called Why We Don't Talk. And I think that was my day to cook, so I was cooking something. And every time this voice came to me, because sometimes they're all false starts. You think you've got this fantastic idea and you start typing and it just peters off. So that happens also too often. It's heartbreaking. You don't want to get into that again. But I kind of heard this voice which was whispering, and I kept trying to put it away, and I said, like, this is not even real, and I'm just going to make my sambar. And then just became like clearer, and what was funny is the clarity was actually in it becoming more whispery. And then I realized it's a child, and I felt if I don't type this down now, this voice is fading. And so I just left everything, and the 15 or maybe 10 minutes it took me to type that story was just this voice. And I had to ask it questions, like I had to, like, why are you whispering? And what's happening? How old are you? So all of that, and for me, that's a mystical part about writing, where your first line, because somebody told me this, they said, the first line in that is, are we friends or are we just the hi-bye types? And then the last line he said was like very connected, and I didn't write it like that. I didn't write it with any kind of thought that this is how it would start and this is how it would end. So for me, story writing is not about the actual sitting down and typing of it. It's what happens in your head when you're not trying to write. It's a things start settling in your head, and things become so real that after a point it's like a bio break. You just have to go and put it down on paper because it's literally leaking out of you. That's the only way I would write. I would not want to write something that's not urgent and intense and raw, and it's violence to keep it inside me. I would write only then.
And when you talk about that urgent and strong voice that almost seems to possess you, shall we say that these voices are mostly strong female voices?
Yeah, sometimes they're kids, sometimes they're female, and like The Girl Who Couldn't Love is actually, you meet the protagonist when she's in her late 40s, but the story's central incident occurs when she's 8. So it takes you back to her childhood, I feel, and that was the story that I was trying to tell. The rest of it is frills. The fact that she is much older, the fact that she's got a particular lifestyle now, those are my synthetic additions to the story, consciously synthetic additions. But the fact that an 8-year-old child can go through a trauma like that, how would she or he process it? That has come more organically, I would say. Like it comes to you like a ready-made story, and you have no choice in the matter.
Great. And I think I would like to part with that a question that always bothers me, which is that when we think about the fact that you have written all this work, and you poured in so much of your intensity into it, and that's what makes literary fiction what it is. And yet in our time there is no doubt a certain, I don't know if that's my feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a certain way in which we do, literary fiction doesn't have that pull in the age of Instagram or etc. So how do you make peace with the fact that something that you've really poured so much of yourself into may not be appreciated as much? Or are you okay with the fact that, well, I have constructed the book out there, it's right now there, something will happen, maybe sometime, maybe not today, a few years later, or maybe in...
I think I would be depressed or disappointed if I wrote for something like appreciation or applause or somebody else's approval. But since my stories actually burst out of me without permission, even from me, is what I feel, then I feel I have a duty to those stories to tell them, because these are character driven, and it's almost like you said, being possessed by these characters, and they have a story to tell which I have no experience in. I have no idea what I'm typing when I'm typing. But like I said, it's not a mystical process. It's like something that is settling in your head throughout, and you just kind of put it all out in one burst. And I probably have an issue with some people who come and tell me something like, I read your book, it was nice. And I know it's a lie, because none of my writing is nice. My writing is not supposed to be nice. So I know that's a lie. And if I want to feel bad, then I can feel bad about that. But I also meet enough people who do read my stories and who are,
that's great.
Who understand something about that process.
Yeah, but it's because, I'm saying that from the perspective that some of the greatest writers I like in the world are, at least in contemporary times, are people who are leading very obscure lives, and I don't think their books sell as much as Chetan Bhagat's does. And I'm not even talking about people like Salman Rushdie. There's this Pulitzer Prize winning writer called Stephen Millhauser. Most people haven't heard of him, but for me he's one of the best writers. And if he didn't have that, as you say, that urge and that sort of connection with his own urge, then it would be really sad. So that's what my point was. So
yeah, for me, I think I would love, in fact, every time I write a book, I'm like, that's my last book. I just don't want to write again. It just takes too much out of you, because I have so many other jobs I'm doing, and I'm at the back end of the festival, I'm at the back end of some magazines. I'm very, very happy. My hands are full. I do not need to write another story till I die. I've never wanted to write a story. But I just feel that when that urge comes on, and when that story just starts multiplying, and the characters are very, very clear, then you just have no choice. So which is why I write very little. I don't write too much, and I write short stories. I try to condense everything into, as brevity is like God to me. I hate when 2 words are spoken, when you should just be silent perhaps and not have any word. So for me to write, I would not write unless it's overflowing that badly. And if it's that, then I don't care if anybody reads it.
Great. Thanks, Shinie.
Thank you, Ravi.
Yeah, we have come to the end of our conversation. I think we compressed a lot. We traversed many dimensions and facets of the world of writing, and I really hope that these conversations continue, and hopefully we'll have more such conversations. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Ravi.
Thanks.